negative.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. This is the podcast where we encourage you to text in your questions on God, on Christianity, on comparative religions, on the Bible, on Jesus, and how it interfaces with your life. We believe church is a place where people should be able to ask any question they have on these things, but simultaneously a place where people are often afraid to ask them. I don't know, maybe you felt like you'd be judged if you would ask the questions you have about God in a local church. Maybe you feel like people would look at you like you're weird or you're crazy. Maybe you think your question is stupid. I guarantee you it is probably not. Maybe you think it's too simple or too complex, that it's old school or so out of the box that who would even think that way? That's what this podcast is about. Text those questions into 815-314-0363. 815-314-0363. You can also join us at 216 The Net. You can go right on to Facebook there. You can post your questions there. You can join us at Fellowship of Faith Facebook as well. Who do we got in the studio here today? Shout out to Ken Jones, who's producing, right?
Thank you.
Andrew Metcalf, as always, our anchor in the middle chair.
Hello, everyone.
He's an anchor.
He is an anchor. You are the anchor.
He's our solid rock.
Hold everything down.
The solid rock.
You sink us deep, right?
Yeah.
We got Steve Wells back from Nebraska here this afternoon.
Yep.
Steve, how was the trip?
It was a good trip. It was short. You know, we didn't see a lot of people, just mainly family. But we got to go to it's called Rocaberry Farm, which, you know, it's supposed to be for families. And you go out there and you go, you know, they have all these haunted houses and pumpkins and little things for the kids to do.
Fall fest stuff up and down, right?
But weirdly enough, it's $15 to get in, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, we had a family, all of our family was out there. And of course, my parents, it's just what they do. They pay for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So the bill for this thing is outrageous. But then, you know, you get out there and you smell like funnel cakes and carameled apples.
Yeah, and the kettle corn. Yeah, right.
Everything.
And so the kettle corn was like $12 for 2 bags. You know, so $6. Originally, it's $7 per bag, but you know, at a discount rate, you get 2, and it's $12.
It cost them 23 cents to make.
Carameled apple was $5.50 for an apple with some caramel. I mean, that's so. Anyway, they say it's family friendly, but it's like, who can afford this stuff? You know? Especially in these times. I mean, inflation is skyrocket, right? So, anyway.
What are you, 90? In these times.
Hey, I
remember back in the day.
I just got done telling you that I used to take a seniors trip down to Branson. And so,
you're ready to be on the other side of that trip here, Steve. You know who's going to take you.
I'm looking forward to it. Andrew's going to take
me down to Branson, yeah.
Well, welcome back, brother.
Yeah, thanks.
Good to have you back. I heard you got to do a lot of haircuts while you're down there, and
did.
You know, the barber skills come ripping back out.
I did. I know that Barbie's grandmother, who is 93 years old, who literally runs this farm. I mean, it's 10, 12 acres. She's got horses. She's got guineas, which fell
what
in
is
love.
A guinea?
What are guinea pigs?
No, a guinea.
A guinea pig farm? That'd be kind of cool.
It's a bird that do nothing. There's no value to it.
Is it like a meat-eating bird or something?
You
Like,
don't eat it. No.
Okay.
They just walk around in groups.
Okay.
That's it.
They're kind of
Good
cool.
protein.
Chickens. She's got some horses. She's got a donkey, a pony. And she literally does, she bales hay. So guy came over and like put it into the
And when you
bales.
say she bales hay, like she at
93 67 bales by herself.
What?
60.
I
So
would throw like 4 and like I'm done.
tired.
You know?
This woman is like incredible.
Yeah.
So at 93, she listens to the show. So
All
Vivian,
right.
grandma.
Shout out. And this is
love
Barbie's
ya.
grandma, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Barbie's grandma. If you're listening here today, you are our idol
She's
out
awesome.
there. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope you like your hair, but text in if you don't, and we'll rag Steve on it.
She's gotten a lot of compliments on it. So
From Steve.
your hair looks great. Let's go to a question so I don't get hammered here.
Well, today we were talking all things worship. We've had a few questions come in regarding worship and song choice and why we do it and all those types of things. So looking forward to discussing this.
He looks at me like you're going to get
well, because some of these questions came in right before last week's episode.
He's been saving this one. He's been compiling the questions.
Not that I didn't value Tina's opinion, but I feel like we should talk about it.
have a
Well,
worship director
Our
on the
worship
show.
director is here.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
By the way, all three of us are on staff at Fellowship of Faith. It's a church here in McHenry, Illinois. Steve is our worship director. Andrew's our technical director. I'm the lead pastor there. You can check us out at fellowshipoffaith.org if you want to learn more about us, or honestly, to catch just past shows. All of what you're listening to is a podcast.
Mhm.
You don't have to just catch us live. You can catch us in recording, and just it's pretty easy. Go to the FOF Plus page at fellowshipoffaith.org, and you'll find it.
Oh, and I will put a caveat out there. So we are having issues with our podcast host provider.
Well, that's no
So
good.
the last few episodes are not up there yet. They told me 3 to 5 days, and they'll have our issue resolved, and then we can continue. But
So in 3 to 5 days.
it's been about
go-
3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So we are working on
Right.
getting past episodes up there.
Is
Hopefully
it
they'll
a
be up there soon.
censorship issue? Are we doing things
No.
Are they
incorrectly?
blocking you, Andrew?
Are there certain
We are not
words?
being censored. It's strictly
Can-
old technology.
Can we
so.
say this word today? Wow. He went to space.
Yeah, that's why he's up there.
Yeah.
Finally, right?
Is he
finally
still
hit
there?
the final
No,
frontier.
no,
Is
it's
it
10
long-
minutes.
All right, wait.
Oh, okay.
No one has any idea what you're talking about here.
So Captain Kirk.
well, no, you're pointing at something on the
Right.
wall.
Well, that's right.
It's the
Not
mustache.
everybody's viewing this.
Not everyone's in the studio
In
with
fact,
us here.
the majority aren't viewing this. So in studio, we have this mustache that is kind of like a chalkboard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it says Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
Why did you put Captain Kirk on there today?
Because he finally hit the final frontier.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, not in the USS whatever.
Did he
it was.
really though? Was he really?
He went
in-
with
in
Bezos, right,
space?
or whatever.
He did. He went with Bezos.
When did he launch?
I'd have no
This
idea.
morning.
This morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
90,
Okay.
90 something years old. So your grandma's throwing hay bales. He's
Yeah.
finally going to space.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
What am I
that's
doing
great.
in my 30s?
yeah. I pulled a muscle earlier. It's,
I need to up
How you
the
doing?
ante a little bit.
Uh,
Well, jumping into worship again. If you have any questions about worship services, our worship services,
Worship
church-
in
church
general,
worship
the
in
theology
general.
of worship. I mean, why we do it, what it is, how it compares to how other religions do it, what's good, what's not, what's
hopefully we'll tackle some of that
Helpful,
today.
yeah.
what
So,
is worship?
what exactly, all of it.
Maybe
or
let's start
honestly,
out with that.
Oh,
Any
my.
other question you have, you could text in any time, even though we're theming into worship today. And certainly, even if we don't answer your question here on the spot, it goes into our inbox and we get to them eventually. So we're not pushing you off. Send them in. But yeah, what do you got, Andrew?
I think let's start out with more of a general definition. So, why do we worship, and what is worship?
Why do we
Very, very
worship and
broad
what is
questions. But
worship?
why do we worship? Does God need our worship? Who needs to worship? Yeah,
Does the
let's
word
start there.
worship derive from anything?
You know, there's an old kind of tongue-in-cheek thing where people will say it's worth-ship.
Mm.
And yeah, of course, I mean, there's derivatives out of Middle and Old English with Germanic roots that go back, and it's not a direct translation from Greek or anything like that. But I mean, the concept is what's important here, not so much the phonemes or the vocables or whatever you want to call it, the language itself. I don't know. You want me to jump on in, Steve, or as our resident worship director
No,
here,
I
do you
think
want to lead the way?
let's lay the foundation
All right.
biblically as far as when you read the Bible and you interpret the Bible, what you would probably so where are we starting from here?
I think it's important to start from the idea of worship as a concept word more than a specific word you find you look to find biblical proof texts for. Because worship is a word that encompasses a number of biblical motifs, pictures, and vocabulary that all subsume themselves under this umbrella of basically ascribing worth to something. So if you are going to value something, venerate something, or treat something, dare I say, even as more valuable than you, that I think is a good basic common definition of worship. Now, sociologists and historians will often equate it to sacrifice. So as you look at worship in ancient contexts, it always seems to be centered in sacrifice of some kind. And I think that actually also has some drive for us today in understanding of the term of going, how does a sense of sacrificing something play into this concept that we call worship? It's certainly more than just singing songs that make you feel good or saying some, fixed right prayers or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be throwing a virgin off a cliff into a pit of fire. Right?
I'm coming back.
That's what they used to do.
Well, and
you see that on
legitimately,
like King Kong.
coming back from this conference and had a couple of days to sit at the feet of Rabbi Chad Foster. All right. And he is actually a Lutheran pastor who went to yeshiva, which is closest equivalent, a Jewish seminary for rabbis, both here in the States and later in Jerusalem, trained under an Orthodox rabbi, but as a believer in Jesus as the Messiah. So he's literally like ordained in both camps. And, kind of fascinating to just hear a Jewish Christian's perspective on the Bible, which is a very Jewish book, of course, and to take a continued Jewish lens to interpreting the world of Jesus and things like that. But, you mentioned like throwing the virgins off cliffs and King Kong. And, he's been to Israel probably like 70 times besides having lived there for stretches of time. And he does tours, and he was showing Caesarea Philippi. And if you're unfamiliar with Caesarea Philippi, it's one of these areas up in the north of Israel. And the way he described it is, think about it like 8 Mile in Detroit. I mean, this is kind of like on the outskirts in the place that you don't really want to be in Israel. It was known for paganism. It was known for all of the practices that went with paganism. It was kind of like the dark area that you didn't go at night, if I can put it that way. Yeah. And there at Mount Hermon is a shrine to the god Pan. If you don't know the god Pan from Greek mythology, he's like that, the half man, half goat, always playing the flute, that kind of one, like satyr or whatever. But some of the interesting derivatives of Pan is that like our word panic is based on his name, because he was the god of terror, the god of fright. And there's this shrine literally next to this cave called the Gates of Hades. And it's just this big dark cave, and it's a water source that comes out of it that feeds a tributary that eventually goes down into the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, and so forth. But what they would do is they would actually offer sacrifices there. And what you would do is you would sacrifice your baby to Hades. And the way you knew if the sacrifice worked is you would go to this big, deep, dark chasm and cave that this water source was coming out of, and you would throw your infant into it. And if your infant ended up downstream, well, then your sacrifice was rejected. You knew that Hades rejected your sacrifice. Wow. But if it was basically swallowed into this cave, they hoped and believed that the sacrifice was then accepted. And what's really fascinating about this is where Jesus takes his disciples. And in Matthew chapter 16, he goes, "Who do people say that I am?" And you remember this at all? And maybe some of our listeners do. If you're unfamiliar with the story, you could look it up in Matthew 16. And they go, well, some say that you're Jeremiah, who's one of the Old Testament prophets. Others say you're Elijah, which is another one of the Old Testament prophets. And others say you're one of the prophets. They're not going to kind of pin him down, Yeah. And Jesus is like, okay, maybe reading between the lines here a little bit. These are all good answers. Jesus certainly was a prophet. You could see that correspondence. But then he turns to this guy named Simon, one of his followers. And he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And he goes, "You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And he goes, "Simon Bar Jonah, Simon son of Jonah, this was not revealed to you by humanity, by flesh and blood," is how translations will put it to you, "but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you're now Peter," which is a way of just, it's a word that means rock, right? "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." And he's saying it literally right in front of this huge rock. And the gates of Hades will not overcome it, in front of this actual cave called the Gates of Hades, talking about in this place where people are sacrificing to these gods that they fear, even their most beloved and prized possession, if I can use that language, their own children. Jesus saying, this is exactly where I want you to build my church. My church is not going to be built in safe sanctuaries. My church is not going to be built in the sanitized places of this world. My church is not going to be built in these protectionist little enclaves that are trying to disassociate or flee from the world. No, we are going to go right into Caesarea Philippi, into the shrine of Pan, and the gates of hell themselves will not prevail. I mean, you get chills. You kind of hear that. And it strikes me so much in this worship question about how people, I think everyone worships something. Whether it's God or not doesn't matter. Everyone worships something. Everyone is ascribing worth to something above them as what is most valuable in their life, or what they fear most in their life, or what they want most in their life. Those are all idols. Those are all what we elevate. And that's what religion is about, is basically what do you believe about what's most important in life. And so everyone's worshiping something. Mm-hmm. right? And it's fascinating to me that what's so unique about Jesus and Christianity is that while we do worship in Christianity, the fundamental basis of the religion is not based in worship, our worship and what we're doing for God, but rather what God has done for us and the sacrifice that he has made for us. He turns the whole thing on its head. And so what we call worship is basically just like this gratitude, this response, this pledge of allegiance, if you will, just out of, you did that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cool kind of how worship is hovering in that.
Right.
So that's some of my take on it.
So kind of the right of the sacrifice that they were making in that cave to Pan, that was their form of worship in order to get something from Pan. Or to not have something wrong. Whereas we flipped it because we're worshiping out of thanksgiving for what we've been given already.
We're not trying to bribe God, and we're not trying to buy God off, which is what most of pagan worship revolved around in Jesus'
You're trying
day.
to please the gods. You're trying to...
Because
get
whether we
mercy
worship
from
or not doesn't change anything.
In Christianity.
In Christianity.
In terms of God's view of us, God's love for us, what God has done for us. Exactly.
Because otherwise then it would become a works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Again, you're back into the old pagan system of trying to earn God's favor or buy him off or avert his wrath or get him and manipulate him to do something for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are we at then? So now we've got a foundation as far as maybe some of the ideas of what worship can be, who we worship, what we worship, the many different varieties. I think we all tend to worship in our own lives. You know, like what are we putting first and foremost, even as Christians? You know, sometimes I look at that and I think, well, could it be Sunday morning sports? You know, with kids. You know, are you putting that over Christ? Are you putting food before Christ? I mean,
what do you spend yourself in service to as your driving principle or highest good or that which defines you? Because a lot of people, I find, will worship things that they will say are not most important to them, but their life would suggest otherwise. Their actions would suggest otherwise. I've met many parents who feel victimized by extracurricular activities or things like that, but they almost feel trapped the way that the pagans of old felt trapped by the capriciousness of the gods. And if I don't do this, some ill effect is going to come about as a result. So I better pay the proper homage, you know, to have the happy family, or to give my child every opportunity, or to provide a college path, or whatever it might be. And of course, the same principle transfers to about 1,001 other things that we can put that people spend their lives in service to.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I remember hearing you say, you know, for the first couple months after I had started working at the church, was kind of your philosophy of worship and how Fellowship of Faith worships. And I think the term you used was ancient modern.
Ancient
worship?
future.
Ancient future.
Yeah,
worship.
and that's a nod to Robert Weber, who I'll give a shout out. And by the way, because this has been a thorn in my mind since we started, ver the Skype is the old English that we get our English word worship
Ver the
from.
Skype.
Ver the Skype. And of course, W's make a V sound in German.
Oh, sure.
English is a very Germanic language. Of course. I mean, sorry, I say that like, no, but like, you know, like you've heard of a Wagner opera. I mean, don't go, it's a Wagner opera.
Well, like my last name, Vels.
Vels, yeah. Right. We're here with Steve Vels in the house.
It's actually German Herr Vels, Mr. Wells.
Yeah.
But yeah, I took 4 years of German in high school.
And you can still go 9.
And
right?
then get this. I took 4 years of German because I thought, well, that's my ancestry.
Yeah.
So then I take the ancestry. I'm not German.
What are you?
I'm English.
What did come up? You're English?
Yeah, I'm English.
Oh, that
Now what do I take?
Wasted 4 years.
I took
there.
2
I
years of
did.
Spanish and barely passed.
It was
so.
a horrible language. Hard to pronounce. The only thing worse than German is French. My daughter took French.
Oui.
And we, as you say. And so she's singing these songs because singing, you know, helps you learn and
You bet.
just the way that it sounds, and it's a very pompous language, I think. It comes off that way. Maybe that's just because I'm I'm thinking of the French. And if you're in France right now,
Steve
listening to
Veltz
this,
is making enemies in Paris as we speak. Yeah.
we're really going to see our numbers drop in
Yeah,
France.
We appreciate all the listeners out there.
I love you, France.
French fries, French toast. We appreciate you.
Anywho, sorry.
So
Bells,
ancient,
back to the W's
ancient
and V's.
future worship.
Ancient future worship. So one of the things that I think gets missed by a lot of people who've grown up in church environments, especially in denominational or liturgical church environments, is there's always a tendency to elevate the traditions over the Word of God. Because we kind of know God by what we do. Most people do. And so if church is the experience of what we do, that almost starts to take on like a sacrosanct value, is like, we have to do this. It has to follow this order. I have to follow these things, often because some of the same pagan reasons of fear underneath.
And dare I say that can become an idol in and of
Absolutely.
itself. Your worship
Absolutely.
can become an idol.
You can worship instead of worshiping God.
Yeah.
Well, and I would
Yeah.
go even. Well, I've seen extremes to where I realistically think some pastors that I know within the LCMS, which is the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, would happily remove the Holy Spirit and put in Martin Luther as part of the Trinity.
Yep. You see that kind of idolatry too.
Yeah.
Right. And what I like about the Bible is it doesn't really prescribe a fixed method. It gives examples. And certainly it'll say things like praise the Lord, make music to him with the lyre and the tambourine, and raise your hands in songs of praise and things like this, which is always fascinating because the things it literally says to do, churches generally don't do. And the things it leaves to option tend to get enshrined.
Mm-hmm.
But even when it's commanding these specific things, far be it from me to walk away from the base meeting and go, if it says raise your hands in prayer and holy worship, there is actually something to that act that is of value that maybe we would be better off if we followed literally. But I don't think it's so much laying down a prescription of thou must do this or else, but almost equivalent if we're going somewhere and you're pumped, you're jazzed for this, you can't wait to go, and you're going to get to be able to experience it, and we're waiting for it, and then someone says, hey, come on, get in the car, let's go. Right? Well, you can't tell me what to do. I mean, that's almost the wrong way to interpret the command being given, because the command is an invitation to something of joy and expression and freedom even. And what I love about Christianity is there's so much diversity in worship, not only today, but even throughout history, of how people would express their gratitude, thankfulness, and give their lives over in service to God. And sometimes the most clearest acts of worship do not look like worship at all. I'll quote Romans 12:1, where Paul will say, present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. That's word for word, at least out of NIV. But in any translation, it's essentially the same. You giving your life in obedience and service to God is what the New Testament says is the greatest act of worship you can make. It's a far more value than all the prayers you could say, all the offerings you can give, all the songs you can sing, all the sermons you can listen to, all the communion bread you can take.
Yeah.
So
does that mean
it's
you have to be a
broad.
church worker? Because
No.
we're giving up our lives for service of God.
No, and I actually do want to joke about. I was going to joke and say something snarky back on that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, because quite honestly, I think that's a myth a lot of people think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has been propagated, that you have to be in full-time vocational service to really go to the next level with this. We're blessed with the opportunity, the three of us here, to give the best hours of our day and get paid for that, to help lead other people and the things of God. But anything that you're giving your life in service to is worship. I mean, Martin Luther actually wrote a lot about this, and you can read even secular biographies on him where he's noted. It's called the Doctrine of Vocation. And what the Doctrine of Vocation is about is that all of us have a calling, meaning all of us have a calling from God, not only a ministry to the body of Christ and a mission to the world, but a calling of what we're supposed to do in the context or sits and labor or situation in life that we find ourselves in. And so, the examples he would use is like, of course, he's talking 16th century when there isn't birth control. And if you're a married woman, which most women were, you're going to stay home and you're going to raise your kids. And that's a lot of diapers you're going through and a lot of things like that. That the greatest act of worship a mother could give is to change her son or daughter's diaper. It seems like the most menial, dirty, unglorified task, certainly unvalued task by the world, right? Today, as well as then.
Yeah.
And that is the highest act of worship you can do because you've been called to be a mom. And so to be able to do this dirty job, right, that blesses this child, that continues them on a path towards, that's worship to God. No one wants to change a diaper, right? That's a spiritual act of service. That's presenting yourself as a living sacrifice. And all of us are called to not just one thing, but multiple things. I mean, you go through your roles. First of all, I'm a dad, I'm a father, right? I'm a citizen, I'm a pastor, right? And you can just kind of keep lining these things up. And I'm so much more than those things, but all of those bring with it responsibilities, callings, and then to spend your life above all in service to God. That's worship.
Yeah.
Because it's back to that sacrifice idea. Right. I'm giving in response to what you've given me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's very important, and I think it's something that can get I don't want to say misunderstood, but misconstrued a lot of the times. Of like, oh well, you're a pastor or you work for a church, like your work is better than mine is.
Right.
I know I used to think that, like, oh well, okay, I'm working doing production, but is that the same as working for the church or doing something directly involved with the church? And it's more about your attitude and how you're doing it than the actual thing that you are doing.
No, you can be a janitor. You can be in food service. You can work in a factory. You can be a skilled laborer. You can be a white collar exec. You can be an engineer. You can be a computer program. Do it with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, to the glory of God, and that is worship to Him.
It's funny when you say that because, excuse me, when we moved here from Nebraska, initially, like when we're out and about and we are talking with people and whatnot, oh yeah, so, we'd have this conversation that's going on 5-10 minutes, just finding out about each other and whatnot. So Nebraska, like, why'd you move here? And then I tell them about the position that I'm in, kind of the backstory about how we as a congregation called Dave, and then Dave talked to me a couple of years later, and they find out what I do. And then you can automatically see the wheels turning inside their head and they're thinking, oh, now he works. He's at a church. He's a worship pastor or whatever they think that is.
Yeah, right.
And then you just start to see, like, what did I say within the last 5 to 10 minutes that could have been offensive to this guy?
Yeah, I know. Way to kill any conversation, right?
Right.
Let it out back. Yeah.
Funny stuff.
So I think going from, because as your vocational act of worship, or your life as an act of worship, now can we switch gears a little bit more towards corporate worship?
And by corporate worship, meaning worshiping together with a group of other people.
Yes, exactly. I think in the typical Lutheran tradition, a lot of traditions and denominations of Christian church, you follow what's called a liturgy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your kind of order of service. What are the things that we're doing during this worship service? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit, how that came about, where that came from?
So liturgy is actually an English word, liturgia, if I can put it that way, and it literally means service. And the idea is not just like, here's the program we're following, though it gets used that way by extension, but literally, here's our lives as an expression of we're giving ourselves in service back to you, God. And you do that in the action, but you also do that in the commitment, the expression that both ties it together, undergirds it, and leads the way. And so when we gather in churches or living rooms to sing songs and pray prayers, which are often called, and they're all liturgies. Even if you go to the most non-denominational, like low church kind of setting where it's, that will take fellowship of faith, where it's, rock band and screens, and you're dressed in jeans and you're not doing a lot of fixed formal stuff. It's still a liturgy. You're still doing elements and pieces.
There's an order,
right?
Yeah.
So we don't have to get kind of weird about that term here. We can use it broadly in terms of what it means. And what it's meant to do is propel, solidify, and express the service to God we're giving by our life, the spiritual sacrifice we're giving to God by our life. I think one of the biggest errors that's creeped into the minds of most Christians today is they see worship as something for them.
Mm.
They come to worship services. You'll hear it expressed in a number of ways, and I hear this at FOF a lot. Very well-intentioned and well-meaning. I just get so charged when I get here every week, or this fills my cup if they're a little bit older in generation. Or I come here to get fed, or I come here to get my batteries, recharged to get through the week, these are wonderful gifts. And at one plane, there is actually truth to it, because when we gather in worship, we're actually receiving something from God. So I don't want to diminish or disqualify that. God is coming to us through his word. God is coming to us through his sacraments. God is pouring his spirit upon us in these moments. But it's not meant to end there. Just like we eat for the purpose of being able to move. We spiritually feed and receive for the purpose of being able to present ourselves as living sacrifices, but also get to express it there. Our praise and gratitude to God. I love, the different ways the Bible will talk about this. It will talk about prostrating yourself, not prostating yourself, but prostrating yourself. The idea of you're lowering yourself before, anyone, but in our case, God. It will talk about, on the opposite end, about elevating, standing up, lifting hands, being risen up. Instead of being knocked down by God, God does not knock us down. God does not rub our nose in the dirt. No, he invites us to stand up and put our hands high with almost a certain sense of boldness and audacity before him, to call on his name as friends. That God comes and bestows worth on us. We're not worthy, but God comes and bestows worth on us. And then we turn it right back around and give worth back to the one who's far more worthy than we ever did, who chose to humble himself in elevating us. It's this kind of cool circular thing that's meant to happen in not only life, but in corporate worship as a microcosm of it. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So I got a question. So if we're living our best life for God, and we're right, and that's worship, why do I feel so guilty not showing up to church on Sunday then?
Because you're a mess.
Thanks. All right, folks, that's it for today.
Right.
Right.
Well,
right. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Right.
I think there's a number of reasons for that. And I can't give one answer to that, but let me give a spread.
Yeah.
And I think all of these have a certain sense of touch point in us all, but some are going to be more accented in certain people than others. I think at one fundamental point, we are programmed by nature to worship God. There is something intrinsically good in it. And we, in our hardwiring, have a desire and drive to be in the image of God and be good. Even though we might rebel against it, reject. We're conflicted people. But there is something stirring in us that is naturally bent to give thanks and praise and gratitude when we receive good things, and most specifically to God himself, who is worthy of all praise to be received. So I think that is actually a big part of it. But I think another big part of it is conditioning and programming. That many of us have grown up, if we've grown up in Christian environments, being told our duty is to be in church every Sunday, our mandate or our command or whatever it might be. And you grow up hearing that, even if you've rationalized yourself to other places, it's still kind of part of your conditioning that sticks with us for a really long time.
Sure.
So I think that factors in, as well.
Yeah. When growing up, I couldn't stand going to church. Couldn't stand it. And in fact, my only alternative was, you had Saturday morning cartoons, which were the best because, you sleep in, you grab your blanket, your parents aren't up yet, you grab a bowl of cereal and you go.
And you have 3-4 hours straight
of just alone time, eating cereal, maybe 2 or 3 bowls,
Yeah.
some toast.
Yep.
You
know,
got to finish the box.
But then Sunday rolls around, you're like, I got to get up. And the only thing that I would look forward to before church would be Davy and Goliath,
The old claymation. Yeah.
which was horrible. But it wasn't at the same time. You know,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Is that why you got a Jeep?
That is why I got a Jeep.
Just trying to relive the glory days.
Yeah. But it was just like, I dreaded it. But at the same time, if I didn't go, I did, to your point, I felt guilty.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, I should be there. But why? You know?
And
Because I knew what was there. It was stuff that didn't interest me, people that didn't interest me,
Yeah.
like a staleness.
Yeah. And I think that's so common for most people.
Even a smell, you know, like at our particular church, it was a smaller
They do.
church.
They have certain smells. And
The
it's
basement,
not
you
even,
go in the basement, it's mothballs
Yeah.
and
but it's
casseroles.
a combination of things. And you can't,
Casseroles.
yeah, right.
which is probably why I don't like any type of casserole or like anything with mayonnaise now, because it just brings me back to my childhood church days.
That mothball green bean casserole. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
eat
special.
this. I don't want it. Anyway.
So I guess that brings me a little bit to the enjoyment factor of worship. Should we because you said it's not for us. It's not about filling us up, even though it does in a way. Is it something that's supposed to be enjoyable, or put your preferences aside? This is just what we do, and you're gonna like it.
No, I like something C.S. Lewis said, and he didn't say it about worship, but I think he said it about an underlying principle that this is an extension of.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in relation to happiness. And he said, when you spend your life in pursuit of happiness, you rarely find it. But when you spend your life in pursuit of God, you find him, and happiness is often thrown into boot. And that's his language, often thrown into boot. I just kind of love that, like 1950s way of putting it.
He was
But
very northern.
yeah. Yeah. I think there's something very similar in worship with that. If your purpose in going to worship is to feel good, to be happy, to get some kind of emotional hit or fix or whatever it might be out of it, you can, but like any drug, it's not going to last.
Mm-hmm.
And you're always going to have to find something that ups the game. And you see this happen a lot in churches, especially the most amazing churches with the most incredible production. You can't keep outdoing yourself. Yeah. And so for most people at some level, it's always going to hit a point of boredom because it becomes familiar and you just can't keep upping the ante. It's like a heroin addict trying to get that bigger and bigger hit every time to relive that. You know, we habituate. Mm-hmm. But if your purpose in going to worship is really nothing to do with that, it's to go, I'm here to ascribe glory to God today, to pay allegiance to God today, to show my gratitude to God today. What I find, if that becomes the main focus, not always, but often, joy, happiness, feeling good, or feeling moved often becomes a natural byproduct. And quite honestly, for me, and this is actually a strange difficulty for me at times. Sometimes I find that my deepest moments of worship are when, like, the band and the production sucks the most. Because I have to actually mentally flip a switch to go, I actually have to commit myself to worship here today. I have to force myself to raise my hands when I don't want to raise my hands, to sing louder, even though this is droning on and there's like a melody that's completely unfollowable from like some dude that's like totally like tone deaf. You know, we've all been it. I mean, I was leading this last week. There's nothing worse than this. I know, right?
No. This last week for Dave was like the best worship experience ever.
But you know what I mean? And when you find you can put yourself in that place and you drown out everyone else, and you stop worrying about how bad the band sucks, or how uncomfortable the chairs are, or how long and boring this is going on, or how flat the language is, or how not into it I am. You just go, God, I am just, here it is, you know, and you pour it out. Man, sometimes I think that has more value. And more positive benefit and more result, which kind of really does suck for both of you sitting here. Because, I mean, and I'm not saying this to like blow smoke up your rear, but you guys are phenomenal worship leaders. What you've done for the production value of worship and creating a naturally conducive and joy-filled, powerful environment is incredible, guys. I mean, it's second to none. And yet the danger of it is it can lull all of us to sleep because you dish it up so easily that we can take it for granted and start to put the onus on you to create worship for us rather than taking our own responsibility to give praise and glory to God regardless of what songs you're singing or how in key you are or how well the lights are synced or the mood is set or the prayers kind of like swell at the right moment or the key changes happen to kind of invoke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not only that, but like, so we went to, well, I think both of you know this, we went to Zach Williams and We the Kingdom and
Yeah, you mentioned it a couple weeks ago, right?
And it was great. But at the same time, the danger, because I know so much about what's going on, to put that on, what's going on behind the scenes, the production, the what's happening with the musicians, if there's an issue, that's where my mind is.
Yeah.
And it's horrible because I can't just go there and participate in worship without being somewhat judgmental even, you know, where it's like, I wouldn't have done it that way. Well, guess what, Steve? It's not up to you because this isn't your deal. Why don't you just listen and sing with them? And then some people will be like, well, how come, you sing every Sunday and lead us in this time of music and worship and whatnot. But if you go to a concert, you sit there. You're not raising a hand but like you would normally do on a Sunday. You're not singing. You're not doing, well, no, because my mind is like, I'm learning for one, because I always like the opportunity to learn. And I don't have that opportunity a lot because I'm at FOF every Sunday. And so I look for those key times to learn, but at the same time, I feel a little bit robbed, if I could only get out of my own head sometimes and stop trying to learn about these things and just be in the moment of what God is doing within that atmosphere, I guess. It's frustrating sometimes.
And it's like, and so how does God meet me in this place? Because if I've come to this place, and how does he mature me through this? As opposed to going, oh, why did I get into this and trying to regress, going, okay, here's the next challenge for this level.
Yeah. What I find is that for me, the most intimate times. So, I've done every job, literally every job.
I think you literally have. I think you've been like on Wicked Tuna.
Right.
I think you've been the Ice Road Trucker. I mean, seriously, it wouldn't surprise me,
Mike
Steve.
Rowe.
It would not surprise me.
But I sold windows at one point. Here's a crazy story. So this car that I had was a Ford Probe. Remember the Ford Probe?
Yeah, I do remember the Ford Probe.
Yeah, 94.
Not a good name.
No.
It's just like,
But the thing barely got over 55 because if you did get it over 55, the wheels are going to fall off. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going out and I'm selling these high dollar windows. I mean, I'm a double hung window, which is probably $1,100. So a farmer to redo his whole house is going to spend $40,000, which was not a rarity for me. So anyway, I'm going out rural Nebraska and snowstorm. And this guy's really wanting me to come. And I'm like, hey, do you still want me to come? Because it's pretty bad out there. Oh yeah, just come on out. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? It's windows, how big of a priority. So I'm going out there, and this is by far off topic, but I'll get back to it.
The parable has a point.
Yes. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere, snowstorm, and I happen to get stuck. And I can't see anything there's nothing out there. Yeah. It's wide open field. So it's so cold that I can't get out. My car's only going to last for so long as far as gas to keep me warm. I called Barbie, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't exactly know where I'm even at, because this was before GPS, smartphones, that type of stuff.
Right.
And so I'm praying, get off the phone with her. And from the corner, and so everything in Nebraska is on a grid. So it's not like around here where there's a lot of diagonal hill roads, that type of stuff.
Winding streets.
Everything is on a grid. So if something's coming at you from a diagonal, I don't really know what it is. But it's two giant lights that are getting closer and closer and closer to me. And I get back on the phone with
Jesus, is that you?
I get back on the phone with Barbie. I'm like, I don't know what's coming at me right now, but just stay on the phone with me, okay? So all of a sudden, this giant, it was a forklift. a giant forklift comes
Like
and
something that like lifts tractors is what I'm imagining here in Scott.
sure,
size
yeah,
and scale.
probably, yeah. So it comes around the back of my vehicle. It puts its forks underneath my vehicle, and I'm like, you are not gonna believe what's happening to me right now. And so anyway, the forks are under the vehicle, lifts me up, tilts me back a little bit because you don't want to drop it.
Yeah.
I used to, again, I was in the Navy. That's what I did in the Navy. I was trained to go up to a 60K forklift, basically.
Okay.
So I know what's going on. I just don't know where it came from. And then he proceeds to back me out. We drive about a mile down the road.
Up on the lift the whole
Up
time.
on the lift,
Yeah.
Bouncing a little bit.
Sure.
And he
And by
dropped.
the way, he didn't like get out of the car and introduce himself or anything.
Nothing.
Yeah, you're just
He
you're just
drops
going for
me,
a ride.
puts me on the road, drops me down. He takes off. That's it. And I'm thinking, how is that? That had to have been like God's angel coming out and being like, you know what? I drive forklifts too. So anyway, I'm okay. And I got home and I'm like, I still get excited about this because I still just can't even believe that it happened. And Barbie's like, you've got to be kidding me. But anyway, I got home safely and here I am. And whatnot. Now, point being to this is that I used to drive a lot of late nights because my appointments would be about 3 hours away from my home. Well, that means that I'm driving at midnight, 1 o'clock at night just to get home. Some of the best times of closeness and worship to God was when, like, let's say Sweetly Broken comes on and you're just driving by yourself and the imagery and the lyrics from the song draw you into this moment where you're just sharing with God.
It's meditation.
It really is. And to me, like, that's some of the most important and closest times that I've been with God, which I would consider worship. So,
and something I like about your story too, I mean, I think it really sets up a good analogy for what worship is, going back to that original question, because you experienced something so crazy, but in a good way, right? So unexpected, so surprising. It's not like you've never seen a forklift before. It's not like you've never been but I mean, this doesn't happen. You've experienced this rescue, if you will, in the strangest of means. How do you respond to that? I mean, you're still telling the story now.
right.
Because it's moved you, and you're telling the story because you're almost like gushing on whoever it is that did this and how, look what he or she did for you. This is kind of what worship is.
Right.
We want to express back. We want to give back. We want to tell the story. And I don't just mean evangelism, though that's certainly an expression of worship, but just, God, you're amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened.
Now,
this is what worship is, expressing glory and honor. Yeah.
Now, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll try and look for confirmation, or try and rationalize. So what do? I go back out there at a later date to say, if
you went back right away, man,
where did this thing come from? Because there's no buildings out here.
Right.
So how far did that forklift have to travel? And how did they even know me?
All of it.
Right.
Where you were, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
There's probably a probe joke in there someplace out in Nebraska with a farmer.
I mean,
anyway,
I can always place an inappropriate
but that's what you were
joke.
driving.
Yeah,
so.
right.
Hey, let me give a shout out here just really quick. This is questions you never thought you could ask in church. And while today we are focusing on questions that we've been receiving around the topic of worship, we invite you to text in any question you have to 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. Any questions on God, theology, the Bible, Christianity, comparative religions, its intersection with life, morality, you name it. That's what this is about. No question is too out of bounds. We don't believe that questions should be buried down. We want you to ask, and we think God wants you to ask. And we think a path of spiritual formation happens when we ask and honestly wrestle with the questions we have about God. You can join us at 21.6 The Net as well if you're not already. With this podcast goes live 12:30 Central Time every Wednesday. Or Fellowship of Faith. You can catch past recordings there, though our past episodes, we're having issue with our podcast provider. They will be up soon, so give us a little patience.
Hopefully
if
soon,
you can't see the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
All right. So hey, I've got a question. Dave, you're pretty well traveled. I've never been out of the United States. I know you have. Maybe Canada when I was a kid, but does that count?
Yeah, does that really
I
count?
don't think so. And and you've been a pastor at Fellowship of Faith for 18 years.
Yeah.
Have you partaken in like a Buddhist worship or any other type of worship? And was it same? Was it similar? Or, you know,
Let me. I'm gonna be careful with the word "have I partaken."
Yeah.
Because that can imply a number of different things there. So let me use the word "have I experienced?"
Yeah, there you go.
If that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And yeah, I've had the chance to experience worship in a variety of Hindu settings. I've had the chance to experience Muslim settings, Jewish settings, pagan settings, actually. And, of course, within these, don't think of any of those as monolithic. It's like, have you ever experienced Christian worship?
Right.
Well, there's a lot of sub-varieties of that as well. So that's kind of a short answer, yes, to you, Ken. Yeah.
And how did it leave you feeling?
In a variety of ways. I can't give a single answer to that. Sometimes bored, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes sad, sometimes caught up in the emotion of it.
Okay.
So sometimes finding it compelling, sometimes experiencing and going, geez, why don't we do this? This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really full spectrum.
Neat. Thanks. Yeah. Steve, you?
Yeah. So in my early days, probably when I just moved out of the house, was not doing well, was, on some drugs and whatnot, not living the best life, but was interested in always knowing that I was a Christian. So I never had the thought of, well, I may be changing, depending on what I find out there. But I was kind of fascinated with other religions and why they did certain things. And so really observing, so experiencing, observing, I would say, not participating. And one of them was a pagan, like Wiccan, drum circles. I'm a drummer. I love playing drums. So the beats that they were doing
it's amazing.
Were fascinating.
Or can be.
But again, I think probably during that time, probably more sadness for them. It was interesting, but it felt very empty. Like, I don't know how far you can go before this disproves itself. Meaning like you really can't take it to the full end and say, actually, yeah, this is legit, and these are real gods or something that they're worshiping here. So there's that piece of it. Uganda, Andrew and I are both part of the Hope Center Uganda, and which is a children's home over there. I've been able to experience a couple different things. One is how real witchcraft and spells, demonic possession, prosperity gospel type things, where hey, if you do this, you'll get this,
which is the same sacrificial myth.
Totally. And you would think that by now, because of the situation that Uganda is in and kind of has always been in, and I don't see him getting out of that anytime soon, is if the prosperity gospel was real, where's your prosperity? So where are the material or those things that, well, if you just do this, you'll get this. And it's like, well, you're not getting into this. So how are these churches even still existing? I don't know, because that would be a very hard push or sell to say, well, yeah, this prosperity gospel thing really works. Well, no, it doesn't work, so.
But in the hands of a master manipulator and communicator, and many times it is even sincerely done. So I don't want to make this sound like it's all con game, but it is easy to always push the blame and onus back on you. If I only had done more, if I only had done this, with that constant pursuit.
You just haven't done it.
I think that's our natural tendency that makes sense in our brains of like, I get what I deserve. So if I'm not getting what I want, then clearly I'm not doing something.
And of course, and there's a common sense wisdom to it, right? Exactly, because this is how life not always functions, but tends to function.
Yeah. So I think going back to that, you both kind of mentioned an emotional state that you've had, during worship, during some of these other services and things that you've gone to. What place do emotions play, or can emotions play in worship? Because I think in my experience, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not to be trusted, sometimes it is that manipulative moment, sometimes it is. I mean, you can manufacture emotions from the stage as a worship leader or as a tech person. I can manipulate emotions while I'm doing my job. So it's, can that be taken too far, and how can that be, I think, misused or used well and supported well? It's kind of that was like 10 questions.
There was like
all
10
wrapped
questions.
in one, and we have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So wrap it up.
I think you're a holistic being.
Mhm.
People are holistic. They have minds, they have souls, they have emotions, right? They have physicality, they have spirit, all of these kinds of things. And to, I think, bifurcate the person is automatically starting from the wrong premise. So at some level, I think worship should involve all of you and engage all of you. But just like you can manipulate an emotion, you can also manipulate a memory. You can manipulate a thought. You can manipulate reason. So the solution is not to jettison or avoid something as though the other is pure and untouched. You can manipulate anything in the human experience, which I think puts a lot of responsibility upon those who are leading others to make sure that they are not in any way whatsoever manipulating human beings. And that doesn't mean you can't get excited about something. That's different than manipulation, right? Getting excited about something and letting someone share in your emotion with you is not manipulation.
Yeah.
But if you start to attribute that emotional state to the Holy Spirit or to God, or to say that it's required, or that make it your litmus test of whether worship is valid or good today or not, that's, I think, where the problems set in. But if you simply go, wow, I really enjoyed it today, and that really impacted me, and that really inspired me, what a gift of God. But if it didn't, that doesn't mean it failed.
Yeah.
Because that is not the point. That is a byproduct. So you take it when you get it. But yeah,
I would I would also say that God has given us all those things: thought, reason, emotions. I don't think there's anything wrong with being emotional, and if it's a natural response. Now, if it's drummed up because of some intent to show someone, well, look how emotional I get during worship, or look at me, I raise my hands, or look at me, I close my eyes. Well, if it's for others to see, well, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, and Jesus even has the harshest words to say about that in Matthew chapter 5 and 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, where, he condemns the Pharisees who want to be seen by all by their showy prayers. And he's like, I tell you, you've received your reward. This is hypocrisy here.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, if you're using your emotions to get something out of it, like, how you can get probably sometimes where you really want to feel something. And so you'll drum up those emotions to really, well, this really makes me melancholy, and I love this song because it really produces this in me, but I'm not there, but I know that I should be there. So I'm going to drum up these emotions so that I can feel like I'm doing something. And it's like, well, that's not really legit either, So that's always a tricky slope to kind of be on, where if you find yourself judging someone else, again, take out the log in your own eye before you start to remove the splinter from your brother's eye. Like, why are you even paying attention to that person at that point? What are you? Where's your heart at?
Get in your
Where's
own
mind
headspace
at?
with God, not a critique of how others are responding. You got it.
Yeah.
With what do we got here, Kent? About 90 seconds left, give or take. I think what I'd like to do is maybe just give a little bit of closure to the topic, at least for today. We certainly welcome your questions on worship going forward. And if you send some in today and we didn't get to them, we certainly will in the future. That's 815-314-0363. But let's kind of cut through all the philosophy of it for a minute. And I'd like to just put this out to our listeners today. God is inviting you to worship him. You don't have to overthink it beyond that. And my biggest encouragement to you is to put yourself in situations and start practicing a worshipful response to God. Give your life as a living sacrifice, but also codify that in local expressions with a local church community, with people gathered in your living room or wherever it happens to be, and do it regularly. what strikes me about the early church, it wasn't once a week. Why do we think once a week and we don't feel guilty more? I mean, it says 7 times a day I praise you, right out of the Psalms, right? Why don't you feel guilty about that? No, just make your life a spiritual act of worship. And certainly that includes the expressions of what we think of worship in a local form. So find a place, do it, get into it. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. This is Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. We broadcast every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Central, right here at 216 The Net. You can catch us on Facebook there or at Fellowship of Faith. Past episodes, and they continue to come out regularly as our podcast provider works with us at fellowshipoffaith.org. Kent, we got a final?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to check out worship, tune in to 216 The Net on Sunday morning, right?
Yeah, 10 a.m.
At 10 a.m. Central. Or go to just go to FOF, fellowshipoffaith.org, and you can catch it live there.
And one more thing, shout out to Ashley and Raphael for joining us.
Yeah, hardcore.
Good to have you here.
Questions you never thought you could have. 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 In church.